policy meeting, the committee meeting, and Dr. Mike, are you going to lead this or turn it right over to Ed?
I'm just going to turn it over to Ed.
All right, are you going to project?
Can we project?
That, and then who's going to make the adjustments on your policies for you?
Do you know how to do that? I didn't.
I mean, I can.
Well, I think you'll probably have to do it, Ed, because I think you're the only person
Sorry,
at
I
the
had
moment
a
that
crash
knows
course
how.
on
No,
how to
that's
do some
okay.
of this.
And
We'll learn along.
You guys probably don't have access, or you guys do have the access, or do you want to try to project?
I can get her connected up.
I think we all have access now. Yeah.
Because, I mean, we can go through it. You won't see the changes unless you refresh every time I go to make a change for you. And if you can project on one of theirs, I can make that change with her. Yep.
There we go.
Yep.
You just don't have enough class,
We just do it together.
That way
You can see that.
we'll see how it's done.
As you're looking at this here, there were two special updates. There was a special update that came out in March about some of the changes on how you can treat children with diabetes through the treatment stuff. So I will eventually be combining that because I'm not sure if you actually did anything with that one yet. So what happens when we do a special update, we always roll it into the next update when we do our normal updates. So then that way everybody can have access to the consultant to help with that. So I'm going to start with number 40. And if you'll review these, you'll see that in the general overview, you guys all have access to this, right, in the board. So when you go to the overview, and you see in the overview, it will give you the explanation on why all of the changes take place. To make it easier, just when you go into the bylaw and policy changes, we give you a narrative after each one of those changes to give you an explanation and rationale why we made those changes. All I'm going to do is just go over those in paraphrasing most of the changes, and then I took your active policies and I merged them again with the revisions based on state law or some of the recommended changes. This is unfortunately, this is the biggest update we've done in 4 or 5 years. So just kind of bear with me a little bit. We provide you with a lot of legal updates, or what we call legal alerts from our attorneys, our 2 different law firms that we work on. You guys probably are getting some of the updates from Matt, if Matt's still with you. Sure. So on the legal alerts, the first legal alert, just know that there was a change back in December and January on your pupil services staff personnel. They took away some of the requirements for nurses. And what does that really mean? It doesn't mean a whole lot for you. If you have nurses on staff, you have to make sure you're paying nurses now in STRS. Some places that have nurses on staff are paying them in SERS, so that makes sense. It doesn't change any of your policies, but it just provided so the treasurers and the district are fully aware. How would we increase the fund?
What do you want to do?
Increase the font.
Increase the image. On Windows, it's Control Plus, but Command does the same.
Oh.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir. Perfect. So on the next one then, we have the Title IX provisions. In Title IX, we made the changes under the Trump administration for the last year and a half. This year, those regulations are still in place, but the Biden administration is doing a review of those, and they're holding hearings. They've not made any changes at this time. They have expanded some of the Office of Civil Rights coverage to include LGBTQ students or individuals. But just know that at this point, there's no changes in the policies, no changes in the regulations, procedures on how you do the sexual discrimination investigation. That process remains in place this whole year. But it may change next year based on what the Biden administration makes, or recommendations they make. The next one is the changes and rewrite of the Ohio Civil Rights laws. Governor DeWine signed the House Bill 352. What that, in essence, it changed the statute of limitations for employment discrimination complaints from 6 years down to 2 years. So that's into effect now, and anything that, any employment complaint or of discrimination only now have a 2-year window. A lot of the districts, our next legal alert is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That legal alert is addressing the very hot topic that a lot of the boards are faced with throughout the state, throughout the country. We've seen this challenge often in the last 6-7 months. What we've done, we've provided a legal update about equity and diversity and in our policies. We've been proactive. We've made all the adjustments in the last 2-3 years to make sure that our policies are gender neutral and just very neutral based. And therefore, we don't believe we need to make any changes. But there's a big push for a lot of the districts, and some of them are more urban. They have the challenge to where they want to have a policy or some kind of statement about diversity in their community and in their schools. What we recommend is that we don't create a special generic policy for all districts. If a board wants to do something like that, then they could pass a resolution. It doesn't necessarily become policy. So it could be like an equity and diversity statement that they're making, but generally we have stayed clear of creating any general template like that. In order to help address any district that's exploring that, further down in here we have number 14, a policy checklist for internal review. This is a checklist that deals with diversity, identifying all the policies that have implications for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning students. And we have been proactive, like I said, to try to adjust all of these policies over the last 2 or 3 years, but you'll see that on each one of these policy listings, at the end of the title, there's a parentheses that says like 121. That means in January of 21, we updated that. So when districts want to look through their policies and see that, oh, it didn't change a policy in the last 2, 3, or 5 years, you may want to evaluate that just to make sure. I have not taken the time to go through this. I mean, I can help you do that. But by having this list, it helps boards identify what policies may be at question or concerns of identity and equity and diversity questions. We've been pretty proactive. I think your district has gone through the non-discrimination policies and things that we did last year. Then you're in good shape. But this year is mainly for an internal review for the board and for the administration to be able to review and see if there's any changes that they would need to make. State law changed again this year with the biennial budget, and we've extended some of the different limitations that were carried over last year for kids who are on remote learning, and then also what happens when the board. Are you guys live streaming your meetings still to the public? Are you allowing those people who are live streaming to participate, public participation?
It's only the president of the meeting.
Who are present in the meeting?
Yeah, before we went back to public meetings, we were allowing people to submit written.
That's what I thought. Yeah, but you stopped that then at the end of June.
I'm not sure that part has stopped.
Just nobody's doing it.
Correct.
All right. So in the policy that we're going to look at today, we asked that exact question: do you want to allow them to do that or not? So you'll see that here in the first policy that we address. Graduation pathways, they've been modified a little bit, but it's not going to change much. In the biennial budget of the House Bill 110, we kept things pretty much standard, and the policies are still in place that affect the class of 2022 and beyond. However, in the springtime, the board and the superintendent had the authority to kind of waive some of the graduation requirements because kids may have been affected by COVID and the online learning and different things that may have prevented them from graduating. So the superintendent would have had authority then to make that adjustment. That was a one-time deal for the class of 2021. However, the biennial budget also gave another year to 2022 class that you could do that. So we provided that sample resolution for you here. Michael, if you guys want to use that, that goes over it. I would recommend not doing it until like March or April, and then that way, if you have kids that fall through the crack due to some of the changes with COVID and special needs kids, you want to make sure you have some flexibility to help graduate those kids. Because a lot of the changes that have taken place, really, they had no say in it, and they were then forced through some of these changes. Many places do not have kids that have gone through them, and so a lot of places are thinking, I'm not going to pass the resolution, it doesn't matter, our kids will go through. You may want to pass it. If you don't use it, it's a one-time issue, it's gone, but at least gives you and the high school principal and the board flexibility to help those children that may have been stuck on something that wasn't on their own. I'm not sure if you guys have anybody that you permit to carry weapons on the grounds, guns or anything, but the Ohio Supreme Court made a ruling change. Pretty much anybody that carries a gun in campus, on school grounds, has to have the equivalent of peace officer training. So the Supreme Court ruling changed a lot of things. We've updated our policies, and we've even included a policy for administrators under weapons. So that's a new policy. I've taken that policy, created it based on what you have for your professional staff, the same rules. So it's identical, and I'll go over that here in a minute. This last spring, we had a U.S. Supreme Court ruling on student off-campus speech where we had a cheerleader who was disgruntled and unhappy and trashed the district and the administration. They disciplined her, got it overturned. It reinforced that students still have freedom of speech, but the district still has the ability that if that student's speech is creating a substantial disruption to the school environment, then you can discipline. For her to be trashing the administrators and the administrators being unhappy really didn't meet that standard, and so therefore the Supreme Court overruled that. It just tells us that even though we don't like what a kid's saying on social media in the evening, we really can't trash them unless it has caused a massive riot or something in the school. Sixth Circuit Court Appeals, which affects Ohio, it had ruled about public participation at board meetings. Some boards had created an environment that was too difficult for people to register and to participate in the public meetings. If you allow them to participate, you gotta allow them to participate. If you don't allow them to participate, that's another story. But if you do, you can't make it so difficult for them that they can't participate. So with that ruling, we updated our bylaw 0169.1, and that'll be the first one that we'll look at here in a minute. There's a toolkit in here. In 2009, we restructured the policy on student publications and student work to try to establish what type of public forum schools have. Do schools have a free, open public forum where they can pretty much say anything they want and any of their work is shared out in the public, or is it a more restricted type of environment, or a non-traditional, non-public forum where student work done in the classroom cannot be shared outside the classroom or outside the school? So therefore it's a closed or non-public forum. Districts have to decide what type of forum they have. Now, is this a required policy? No. But it helps districts try to establish what type of freedoms the students have and then being consistent. So if you have a student newspaper that the students are publishing and putting together and working, are they sharing it outside that classroom? Are they sharing it outside the district? So therefore, then you have some of an open forum. Are those changes that, and the students' work being produced, is that actually restricted a little bit by the advisor, or is it restricted completely by the district? And so when you work through this policy, which is 5722, school-sponsored student publications and productions, we provided this toolkit to give you a general overview about the differences of constitutional and school speech. And we talk about pure student speech and school-sponsored speech. But then we also clarify what the Supreme Court has ruled about three types of public forums. We have non-public forum, limited public forums, which most schools tend to be, and traditional public forum is like John stands on a soapbox in the middle of town and can say whatever the heck he wants to say. So that's a total public open forum. Schools generally are not total open public forums. So you'll see in this policy update of 5722, it'll give you options A, B, C, and D. So when we look at D is pretty much a closed or limited public forum, that where you're not allowing a lot of the student speech and work to be shared outside of the classroom and outside of the school. That one will take some time, and when we get on it, I'll show it to you. You can take a look at it and decide what you want to do with it, whether it's going to affect you or not. The first policy is bylaw 0169. Public participation at board meetings. This change is based on the court ruling in the Circuit Appeals. So I merged your information. You have a little more detailed information on your public participation, but you're saying that public participation shall be permitted, and then we've added, based on the court ruling, some suggested text. And it's totally up to the board and Mike on whether you want to do this. So anyone having a legitimate interest in the action of the board may participate during a designated public participation. You guys have always allowed that to happen. But you do, persons wishing to provide their comments in writing as an attachment to the minutes have to do that at least 5 days prior. That doesn't stop them from how I'm reading it, doesn't stop them from speaking. That's just only if they want their minutes to be reflected. C, we just added, instead of the public portion, we're calling it public participation, because the whole meeting itself is public, but whether the public is allowed to participate and speak during that time. We've added another one, letter D. Individuals may not register others to speak during participation. So you may have John Smith come in to register at the beginning of the meeting and he puts down 35 people. You don't know that. Do you want that person to be able to register others, or do you want to put a prohibition on there to prevent it? So that's something to think about. If you do, then you know how to make the adjustments, and I can help you with that. We'll go into edit, and then we'll strike this here. We're going to be making a change here in a minute. I'll show you how we can do that. The additional change in G, during the portion of the meeting designed or designated for public participation, no participant may speak more than one on the same topic. You've always had that. We just added more specific clarifying language. And then
Ed, back on D,
D,
back on D, so the way our current policy is, individuals are allowed to register others, so if we want to...
if you're silent, it doesn't really say that,
Okay,
but it doesn't say you can't.
okay.
So that's sometimes the downfall of putting things in the policy, is it sparked the language. But if you've had that scenario in the past and you don't like it, you may want to select it then to prevent it. And there's no harm in that, but if you're having them register at the meeting, then you don't know if you're going to have 15 people or 2 people.
I would say you want to put that in there. In the wake of what's, been happening around, I think it would be a good idea to have that in there. Just in case.
So when we come in here, you have the ribbon, make sure that the track changes is on. So that means these are highlighted. If you turn them off, you'll see it grays them out, but I turn it on. So then clicking in the HTML editor, we'll come down to this area. And you guys can decide. We'll make that change now, and then you guys can decide what you want to do. If you want to keep that or make the change. And then you guys still allow audio and visual recordings and so on. Now, we've always had the presiding officer in here to talk about what they can't do. The president no longer can prohibit comments that are frivolous, repetitive, and or harassing, but because this is part of the hearing, but you can still do that. We've tried to make the language a little more neutral and objective. It's not that the president doesn't like what he's saying, but rather these are the conditions that you can prevent. So we recommend taking these changes, especially if there's terms that are meant to be frightening or intimidate one or more people in believing that they'll be seriously harmed by what the speaker's saying. So then the president can kind of stop.
So on number 2, where you're crossing off that the statement can't be lengthy, I mean, at what point can they take over your whole board meeting?
You should have in here that you put limits on the amount of time. Are you allowing each person only to speak 3 minutes?
I think it's 2 or 3
Yeah.
minutes and a total of 20.
Is it, what is it, 3?
Is it 3
You did.
minutes,
I
Pat?
think it's 3 minutes
Yes.
per
It's
person.
Yeah.
But if we can't interrupt if they're too lengthy, I mean,
You can stop them. It says here, each statement made by participant may be limited to 3 minutes. So when they violate that, then you can stop them.
so that would allow.
Yeah, that
Okay.
applies and prevents the lengthiness.
Okay.
I don't see that you set it up for 30 minutes.
Yeah, we should be. Is it?
What's he looking for?
It's 20 or 30.
Should be a total of 20 minutes.
We
it 20?
amended
I think it's 20.
that.
This was your current policy that I took. Did you just amend it lately?
We amended it a while ago, the whole, those two.
20
the
minutes.
whole
It's down
public-
here. It's very bottom.
Yep, there it is.
Portion of the meeting is for 20 minutes. I just didn't get that far. So then also at the bottom, then we added what I just mentioned before, 2 options. The board may permit individuals to attend meetings remotely through live broadcast. However, public participation will be limited to those who are in attendance. So is that what you would like, to keep that?
No, I think the problem is that our, trying to do it remotely, we were having problems with our,
Getting the questions or?
no, doing it remotely and having people come in, our electronic system wasn't,
And that's pretty common.
yeah. Wasn't
And
even-
how are you live streaming, and does the live streaming allow for questions to be sent in, or does that system require you to have a person send an email? And then somebody's gotta be there watching for those emails for the
Right.
presence and monitoring it, and then say, okay, here's some questions, and then you alternate online and out. So,
Another angle of that, this is just me talking. If you want to participate in government under normal circumstances, I mean not during a pandemic or whatever, you should be required to come to the board meeting. That's just my opinion. You should have to come. And then there also were a couple cases where people got obscene. They're hiding behind the computer, so they
From
get
home.
obscene at
yeah,
home.
they're not,
But it's up to the board. But my suggestion is you have to come to the meeting if you want to speak.
I mean, it's working now.
It is.
but nobody's,
We have people speaking in person.
yeah, but
Nobody-
nobody's really sending you emails or live stream during the
Yeah,
meeting.
they didn't
Yeah.
before either.
And that seems to be working well. So, do you want to keep the way that it is? You can allow them to do that, but if your technology's not working, and that makes you look bad that you're allowing it, but yet you're really not allowing it because people can't participate remotely. So, Mike, what do you want?
I would suggest that you have to come to the meeting. Is that the first one?
That's the first one.
I mean, you guys can always change it if the world changes or technology changes, or
Right.
but you have to come as a board
Oh,
member.
right.
You're required, and you know that's what I
Well, we
think.
never had any
Yeah.
remote
Right,
participation
we never.
before,
So then it's
COVID.
nothing that they're going to
They're
miss.
not
anyhow.
used to it now.
so, I mean, I'm
You
fine
have
with,
this text that we don't.
the participation in person,
But, okay.
So when the
so we
production
can
goes in,
discuss that,
accept all the track changes.
Yeah, we'll
At the board meeting.
yeah.
How exactly so you have to send it with that. All right, so we'll move on to the next one. This is for the evaluation administration, 1530. I reviewed this. This is the actual template. I really didn't do anything with it because you have a separate policy that Matt Markling created for you in 1530. I don't know if I templated it yet.
Is this 15?
The next one, 1530. So the one screen that you see up on the screen now, this was created by Matt Markling. And so you highlighted the change in the revised code that you just have to follow the process. When we updated ours, we made the changes to reflect the OPES 2.0 changes and the state model. So if you keep your own your own version that Markling did, you just got to make sure you are aware and you know how to do the principal evaluation process.
I think we did his version, and we're not alone in that because then as the law changes,
You have to go with the law,
Yeah.
just so you do. So you either reject this one or make the change.
yeah. So I think we're going to just leave it more simple. We'll just follow the law.
Okay, so then on the disposition sheet, on the far right corner, there's a column that says,
We'll walk you
I'll walk
I
you
will
through
help
it.
you.
I might try to make that
Looks
change.
like the bagels are here, and we ordered bagels, so don't be shy if you
Oh,
want.
how cute. We're gonna reject that, but I'll come back and I'll show you. So then we talked a little bit about the weapons change based on the Ohio Supreme Court ruling. So I took your policy from your professional staff, merged it into the administration, the 16-17, and you really don't have many other changes because it's based on what you've done right. So that one would be ready to go. I'm also going to move over to 32-17, which is the professional staff, and you'll see that it's just based on the changes that have gone into effect based on the rule. That only state and federal agents can carry deadly weapons on school grounds, and that anybody that is designated or approved as security personnel, they still have to have peace officer training to qualify. So that one's ready to go as well, and then the 42-17 has the exact same changes, and therefore that one will meet your needs. So those three are ready to go. The next one is 22-71, College Credit Plus. The biennial budget made a change in the eligibility, and it deals with those who have a remediation free and one of the assessments under the Ohio Revised Code, or meet some kind of alternative. That's just a change in the model for College Credit Plus. There's no other options. That one is ready to go, and that reflects the law. The next one is 2370.01. This one you have to review if needed. You don't have, the district doesn't have a blended learning policy. Blended learning is a special category outlined in statute, where some public schools were trying to create like online classes. You can have online classes, but if you're calling it blended learning, you have a separate category, and you have to have a separate IRN, you have a separate process. The confusion happened last year because everybody wanted to do online learning during the pandemic. And some were calling it blended learning because some was in school, some were out. It just caused some confusion. You can still do your online learning, but if you call it blended learning, you got to fit the statutory provisions of blended learning. You don't have this policy. You can review it to see if you want it. You don't have to have it. It is not a requirement. If you do blended learning, you can only have one teacher working with up to 125 students, and the children who are there in order to get credit have to have at least 910 hours of training throughout the year.
We updated what we had to do. Remember, first they said they gave a date, but now they've extended it
to the middle of September.
We updated it way back when they.
But so you're not doing any blended learning.
We're doing.
But you're doing online options?
Online option, whatever we were allowed to do within that, without having an IRN number.
Right. So you don't have to have this unless you plan on going to
We didn't go to the online option because we had a separate IRN for our thing. So we went to the model where we are tracking hours. I can't tell you we are tracking the hours of our students that are on there.
And you can still do that to an extent with the online learning, whether you're live streaming. Teacher Smith is teaching some of her kids in the classroom and live streamed at home. That's an option. Or just having them do these classes like through Jefferson County, Plato. Some places have bought software to be able to do that. It's costly, and a lot of places aren't doing that. And the big push is that they want kids in classrooms, teachers
We
in
don't
school.
have very many. It's more emergency people that were on that before the pandemic. So we'll keep an eye on this.
You have it. You don't have to do that. You
Yeah.
can do anything with it. You can reject this, update, and then you can always bring it back. It's like, but most small school districts don't do this. If you're Akron, you may.
Well, yeah.
Next one is we're did the weapons one. It was 5111 for enrollment. Who's eligible for registration and enrollment in your district? That really hasn't changed much, but it did make a change to if children of deployed military personnel say they're going to be relocating back here when they're coming off of deployment, you have to allow their children to be enrolled here. We do that normally. There is a separate policy, which is 5111.02. The problem is that a lot of registrars who are registering children are looking at just policy 5111, and so therefore we've added the military children eligibility into that policy, so it's now in two places just to make it clear for everybody. So the actual policy change is in 5111 to allow the military children to be enrolled, and then also once they're changing those positions, if they want technology to be able to access learning and schooling here while they're transitioning either here or out, you have to provide that technology assistance. The laws are very clear. You don't have any options over it, and so therefore 5111 and 5111.02 are ready to go. $5,200 attendance. We've taken your actual policy and we made the adjustments in the attendance, how you take attendance. We made some changes in the past. High school principals generally have always allowed their seniors or juniors to go out on college visits. We would excuse their absence. Technically, it wasn't a qualified excused absence by statute. That has now changed. It's now just cleaner that we can do it. The problem is you have one option to ask, and that option is, are you going to require the student to provide verification of the date, the time, and the visit to that college university? As a high school principal, we always did that for years. I mean, so I would recommend that you would still do that. And then absences due to student placement in foster care or that change in foster care, you can't just withdraw them. You have to excuse their absence until they get seated, or whether they're actually classified as homeless and so on. So you still have to count them present or excused absence if they're changing. And there's a statement. We cleaned up the language from the 2020-21 online or remote learning and how you take attendance. If you have remote learning, how are you taking attendance? So the policy is still in place for you to be able to, you have to record their attendance somewhere, mainly because that's how you're getting funded. So that number's great. All right, so you did approve the March the Care of Students with Diabetes. That came out to you earlier. That was 5336. The board did approve that in June 17th of 21. So this one would be another one that we would reject because you don't have to do it because you already did it. You were proactive. The next one is high school graduation.
Skip the mental health.
5350, student mental health and suicide. The law changed this year with House Bill 110, and it made the adjustments in the curriculum. Health classes, you have to have an evidence-based instruction for kids who are in 6th through 7th or 12th grade for suicide prevention, awareness, safety training, and social inclusion. So this is a change from ODE. There's regs. We put that in the policy, and you just have to make sure that you're making the adjustments in the curriculum. that one you're ready to go. Next one is early graduation 5464. You do have that. The change really is just make sure that your early graduation is provided, but then also in conjunction with your accelerated student plans. Some students are gifted or on an acceleration plan may include early graduation, and so therefore you are permitting that, so I think you're good.
We haven't had a ton of those.
You may get one every 5 years, but
I thought when they made that law, we'd have more of those. We haven't.
no. Well, especially your senior year is your greatest year.
I know.
A lot of kids don't want to
I wouldn't
miss that. I mean, one of my clients has got a Division I kid who's graduating. He's playing football. He's already signed. I think he's going to Penn, and he's leaving in January, going to Penn, second semester. I think he'll miss prom, graduation ceremony, or you can allow him to come.
Yeah.
Next one, 5516, review student hazing. The law changed. We've had a couple court cases that demonstrated some of the kids who were caught hazing died. There are some adjustments in this policy, but we are required, administrators, employees, faculty members, teachers are required to be informed that if they see hazing or suspect it, they have to announce that. They have to bring that forward to the authorities. They can no longer turn a blind eye to it, which is good in a sense. However, we also provide you an option in policy that do you want to include consultants? Maybe you have an ESC gifted consultant working with kids or staff and if they're in the buildings. They also provide an alumni. I'm not sure how alumni would be involved in the schools unless the alumni boosters is trying to implement some kind of hazing component with wrestling. You just don't know. And then volunteers. Do you want to put this requirement on volunteers who might be in the building, whether they're in a classroom or volunteers with football coaching? You just don't know. So those are options. And then down and further in there, likewise, if you want to include this statement, likewise, consultants, alumni, and volunteers, district who fail to abide by this policy may be prohibited from continuing their involvement.
So I don't think we need alumni in there, but consultants and volunteers, we have a lot of volunteer coaches. And in light of some things that have happened in Stark County over the past year, I would recommend you, because that was one right away. Well, I'm a volunteer. I'm not, so my suggestion is take out alumni.
Alumni would probably fall under the
Would be
category of volunteering.
volunteers,
Yeah. But consultants definitely, because we have ESC consultants, so I would be good with that.
Just to be safe. Doesn't hurt to include.
Yeah, we want to.
And then likewise, you want to make a statement in there that if they don't follow these policies, you will be released.
That way our coaches know we're not playing around. You're a volunteer.
Yeah, you just got to make sure they're aware of these changes.
Yeah, we will. I'll actually make that.
And the other option, board employees and consultants, since you're already using consultants, will include consultants, and volunteers shall not intentionally remain ignorant of hazing. So it puts that responsibility on them as well. So that's a change with the statute. Next one is the PBIS system. You guys don't need to have PBIS in your district, do you?
Fully embedded.
Whether you do or not, you have to have it in place. So the model changed, and so therefore we had to restructure the entire policy. So this is kind of a replacement policy for you on your PBIS interventions. There are a couple options in here that deal with restraint, seclusion. So in the new framework, you have the option of, under seclusion, in the past, you'll see I struck this because your current policy doesn't have this option selected. So I just excluded it. What's it mean? It says use communication strategies and research-based de-escalation techniques in an effort to help the student regain control. And then some would say as quickly as possible. But your policy stops at control.
So is there a
Would you
reason
like
we
to
want to do it as quickly as possible?
Well, yeah, I would think you would want to. Whether it's assumed.
No, I mean, in our training, at least from the CPR standpoint, we do use research-based de-escalation techniques immediately when it happens.
Is immediate. You're right.
It's automatically immediate.
So I think that's why a lot of places aren't including that, because the strategies and the techniques, the training tells them it has to happen immediately.
We don't do seclusion or restraint unless there is a chance for physical harm to others or themselves, or they're in immediate danger. Other than that, we allow them to pretty much, the seclusion or restraint model would not take place, without those three scenarios happen, danger to others themselves.
And that's what G, H, I, and J, these ones down here at the bottom. I included them. These are, this is new text, and I include it because it makes sense, and most rational person would include them, but it's listed as an option because it's not actually listed in the language of the model. But I ensure safety of other students and protect the dignity and respect of the student involved. That's the whole purpose of this model. Combined use of seclusion with other non-physical interventions, which are always preferred, that will diminish the need for seclusion in the future. So in essence, what you just told me is exactly what this policy is saying that you should be doing.
We typically try to follow how revised code. If we do have to seclude or restrain, we got to document it.
Absolutely.
GPS, so we monitoring yearly games.
Absolutely, and that's why we put it in here. People don't have to, John Smith on the street doesn't have to go and look up the Ohio Revised Code. They can look at your policies and know what you're supposed to do. So it's up to you. I mean, I can include it or not include it.
Doesn't seem like there'd be any harm to.
No, it's what you're doing. So.
Yeah, it's fine.
And in that same sense, underneath restraint, it's the same kind of scenario. You want to do it as quickly as possible, but that's what your training and your model is, that you have to do it immediately. You're trying to get them to de-escalate as quickly as possible. And then those same G, H, I, and J, we've added use of least amount of force necessary for the least amount of time necessary. So you're working with restraint. You're trying to help de-escalate it and get them under control.
No, I see you added prone restraint. That's good because it'd be illegal.
And at any point, this is a no-brainer. In fact, at any point staff assesses that the intervention is insufficient to maintain safety of all involved, contact emergency personnel. I know how long does it take you to get a sheriff out here? Because you don't have township police or anything, do you?
It's always a sheriff.
You know,
Yeah,
the sheriff.
yeah, that's
You do have an
we have
Oh.
two of them, two sheriff deputies.
on campus all the time? Well, that's good. But then that helps because you're not waiting
And
half
unless staff is trained in physical restraint, which is our CPI model, they're not allowed to intervene regardless.
Yeah,
So we have upwards of 5 to 10 different buildings that are trained.
good.
So
Your
it's-
teams, so that's good.
trained you.
And then you're filing your restraint seclusion reports every year. Mike.
Yep, we are.
Good. Other than that, we've added the language that needs to be in there based on the change in statute. So you do have these options down the bottom on monitoring and complaint procedures. We make this an option to pretty much, if a parent is not satisfied with the response provided, the parent may request a meeting with the board in executive session to address the situation. generally, that becomes like an appeal process. Parents may try to do that anyhow, but it's up to you guys on whether you want to include that as a actual, by including it, it becomes an actual condition, and if a parent's unhappy, they can do that.
Well, just my advice is I would not put that in there because you're dealing with federal law. I mean, this is just the way I'm thinking. You're dealing with federal law, and you guys are elected. You're not trained in federal law, and the inclination is to be helpful, but we don't want to do something that's illegal. Does that make sense? But it's up to you. I mean, it's up to you if you want to put that in there. And I would guess the superintendent would coach you. Just listen. Don't commit to anything. Wouldn't you say, Dan? Don't
I would
promise
say
anything.
if we can't resolve it within our own means, and they want to meet with the board, at that point, there's probably not much of an option. I mean, you're going to have a lawyer involved, probably as a guiding premise, no matter what, in your executive session meeting.
That's true. The lawyer.
And in essence,
you're
they
dealing
would
with
still have the
exclusion
ability to
at
go
that
to
point.
court if.
So if this is left out, that would not preclude them from
No,
doing the board
No,
thing.
that's correct.
Is
That's
that
what I'm
correct?
saying. They can still do that.
Yeah.
And they may do it anyhow. Some would say, why poke the bear and give them
Exactly.
the rationale, but if they're really disgruntled, then they would do that anyhow. And then the board would have to decide whether to let them or not. If you put this in there, then the board will have no choice but to let them. And if you don't, they still have other options at court, and that's when the attorneys would intervene. So on the other question then. Delete that, you can always add it if you want to.
Okay.
The next one is same kind of concept, but it is more special ed. A parent of a child with a disability may file a complaint with the Ohio Department of Ed, exceptional children. They can do that anyhow. They don't have to have it in your policy. And those parents are already informed that they have that ability based on their whose IDEA is it and so on. So I don't know if you want this in there or not.
Really up to the board. I'd say leave it out.
I don't see the need of it. It doesn't make a difference. They're given their procedural rights at every meeting,
Right.
and I don't hide from it. I mean, it's
No, you
if you want to call ODE and talk to somebody or have an advocate or mediation, that's fine. I mean, we work through the process.
So the same sense that even though it's not in there, it happens.
Right.
So
This is my 4 or 5 years in this position that hasn't been an issue. I think as long as you're transparent, communicate with the parents, you're not really going to have to do anything.
and that would be the last option. So I'll save that. You guys review it.
Okay.
It's really ready to go, but if you need to make changes, she can make the adjustments for you. The next one is the big one that I was talking about, student production publications. I would suggest that this is one that I could not merge because of the change, and it depends on your philosophy and what's going on in the district. You would look through it. I know social media was a question that you guys have had in the past. I don't believe you approved the social media component in the past. That was something that you guys were working on the last couple of years. The real question is then, if your students, with their publications and their productions, are you allowing them to share it over social media? That's the big question. Even though you don't have social media policy, you probably still have individuals using social media in the district. And therefore, are you permitting them to share their student work over that social media? So it just may contradict a little bit about the type of public forum that you have. So, like, this is probably one that you and your team need to review, work through, and figure out if your language arts teachers and your drama program, do you have like a radio station or anything like that?
No, but we share a lot of student things, choir concerts, drama things.
And you televise those, live stream them, or anything like that?
Well, I don't know if they're
I
live
know that
streamed.
the high
We
school
have
has-
been over the last year.
Yeah.
We've done more of that.
That's why I bring that up.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the questions.
Is our
Because you're
daily
now
video
showing-
announcements on YouTube?
They are, but it's a closed channel
Is it closed?
Closed channel to whom?
Yeah.
to just students.
I mean, just like the ones that.
Just
kids
students,
do
but
every day.
people outside the
Announcements and that.
school get to see them?
I've seen some of them on YouTube.
No, the link is restricted to only people with district accounts can access that video.
Okay, all right, because that could be the fine line. But do you have anything else? Any other social media? Are the teachers allowed to have their own Facebook account? They share stuff?
Well, we discourage them from everybody having their own school Facebook account. We try to funnel it toward our Facebook.
And that was the point of the social media, to prevent all those Lone Rangers doing whatever they wanted. You could control what they're doing.
It's more by building.
We
Yeah,
have,
their own
well, we
building,
did open it up
Facebook
to that. In the past, we did not, but I think now we'd like to do this.
Each building has their own Facebook.
Yeah.
I know that, but there's not a fifth grade science
It's not
Facebook
really-
account. There's nothing like that that I'm aware of.
So with those Facebook accounts, do you allow the recipients out there to provide feedback or comments back?
So like our district one, correct me if I'm wrong, they provide the feedback, but no one sees that except us. But then Nicole can answer that. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
It does, and just so as long as you have a mechanism in place to keep those records.
Yeah, we do. For the records.
Good.
Well,
So
we have
you
to-
referred to like another social media policy? You said we don't have a social media policy?
Yeah, you didn't approve the social media policy. You guys started to look at it and work on it, but you never approved it.
Okay, what's the number of that one?
7544?
Can you just send us a copy of that to look at sometime?
Yeah, I'll show you here real quick what you have. Let me double check, make sure.
75. I don't know what happened with that. Was we were?
No, you did approve it.
And when you say comments on a social media page, just say an example, we have a building Facebook page ran by a specific person in the building.
For some reason, go ahead, I'm sorry, I was trying to do two things.
I know in our district one, if you leave a comment, no one sees it. Now, you're saying that, so when you're saying comments, so if somebody would leave a comment,
It's a public record,
it's a
and you're
public
required to
record.
make
So
it.
you can leave comments on the individual ones. Not that we can't take that away. You know, I don't see any. I'm looking at Washington Elementaries, for example, third graders were using coding. You know, there's 2 comments. Pretty cool to see at school, fun. I mean, that's all it was. But
I have seen some
So you-
comments actually appear on the districts too. Like
Shouldn't.
once in a while there'll be one that'll show up.
I mean, I got no issue with basically saying that comments are.
I think the administrators can post stuff. Whoever's administering the page can post
Well,
comments on their
I
own.
don't know. Can we post it?
Yeah,
Or
you
do
can post
I
comment
don't
on
know
your
if
own.
it's visible though. Do you
Yeah.
just mean like a comment with pictures?
Like
a
you're
headline
the
and then-
administrator of the Facebook
Yeah.
page. Even if you block comments from outsiders, you can put comments on your own posts.
And I know from an elementary principal.
Caroline, you do have that policy. You do have that policy. I don't know how I missed
Had
that.
comments and
I think you had it,
responses. If you're canceling an event, you put it on Facebook.
The reason
Since the
being-
page is on, you can respond quickly and it kind of goes out.
requested policy for review is the section you have in the draft. It's still in there. And so I made the assumption that you still hadn't approved it. But yet, when I go to your active, it is actually in there. So you guys did eventually approve it.
Okay.
So,
Then-
maybe I'll help you clean some of those things up too, so then that way it doesn't get too confusing. So that, when I saw that, I didn't even go any further, and I knew that was a big question for you guys that you were working through a couple of years back.
I know.
It's backwards.
Yes.
We'll have to, big program.
Is there anything that would need changed on that, or that you make a recommendation?
The social media,
Right.
let me review it for you,
Okay.
if that's all right. Let me review it to make sure. I asked those questions because those are the number one pitfalls that districts are getting into. And Mary, in the community, who's been disgruntled for a number of years, file suit with you because you don't have her comments that she made on the Facebook account, and she hasn't seen it, and so she's asking for a public record for it. If you don't have it, there's a $1,000 fine. And there's others, and say she may have 5 of them that she's looking for. For each record you can't produce, that's a $1,000 fine. So you just want to make sure that you have a mechanism to retain it. The sad thing is, it can be very costly on some of your social media platforms to retain those comments and text messages and things.
I think the impact group is helping. I'll check all that.
The impact group out of Hudson.
Yeah, it's helping us. Because you don't know anything about those.
Mhm.
Yeah, let me check on that. 'Cause we had
So you don't have an app or something to maintain those?
So our Facebook page itself is ran by, there might be 2 staff members that actually have actual access, and the impact group that might be able to add pictures or updates or things that can be done. Now, I don't know what you're saying, how long does it archive itself? I don't know.
It's up to you and the board and your public records retention policy. You have to determine how
Yeah,
long.
I need to.
There's not a statute that says it has to be 5 years, 10 years. Maybe your policy is silent, and then who's to determine how long you keep it? But if your policy says 6 months, or if your policy says 2 years, then you have to do it for 2 years. And what drives that a lot of times is the apps that you buy to maintain or keep those. Because then Barracuda was one of them, a couple of them that would archive some of those plans. Your emails, how long do you keep your emails?
I don't know, do you?
I have 17 years worth, but
Then I believe it's 5 years.
I believe it's 5.
It might be. It is probably close.
I think that's what I set to.
There have been some companies, and through your ITC site, that do it for 1 year. Because it's overwhelming. The amount of
It is.
emails you get, it's just
Yeah.
too costly to store and maintain it that long. So it's just something you may want to look at.
So if
All
your
right.
policy is silent, then what's the length of time that they have to be kept?
Determine by
That's
the
a good
courts.
question.
Indefinitely?
Determine by the courts.
So we need to.
It
look
could
at
be.
that.
So then how do you demonstrate that you violated your policy? Well, you don't have one. Okay, so is it unrealistic? So only a judge would be able to determine it. And then you want to make...
Technically, even if you made a policy that said 2 years, if someone took you to court, they could probably, unless there's a law that defines how much time they...
On certain records, there's a law that says how much, like
Okay.
graduation and attendance records forever. But I still believe that the emails and digital information is determined
Will
by the
definitely
district.
help the possible case if you had your own policy in place.
Well, because your own policy would say that it's 6 months, and anything that happened 12 months from here on out, you don't have to defend that. You don't have to produce it.
What if we make it 1 day?
Probably not realistic,
No,
but
I'm just saying. I mean, who determines what's?
the board. There are certain digital and electronic ones that the board has more flexibility on.
I'll check that.
You're probably your public records specialist, right, for the district?
So they tell me.
Yeah. Good answer.
And when you do your training, are you going to the Capitol Conference? Because they'll do the public training again, public records training. All right. So work through that. Michael, if you have questions on it, I'm happy to walk through it together. I'll take a look at your social media policy to see if something is sticking in my crawl that's a concern. I'll let you know.
That's the big one you talk
Next one, 6114. This is for cost principles. The sad thing is, we've changed this a couple times because of the Edgar, the Ohio Department of Education, general accounting rules have all changed those regulations. But lo and behold, we got a third ESSER money. And you probably didn't get any ESSER 3 money, did you? Did you get over $1 million? Oh, yeah. And so therefore, you have to have these adjustments to reflect the changes in the requirements for the ESSER 3. So these rule changes on capital expenditures, and the biggest one is that if you have an expenditure of $5,000 or more for a single item, it has to be included in the inventorying, and then also you have to have prior written permission to spend that money. Well, the way Ohio sets up their CCIP and the SR3, you had to provide a proposed plan before they would even approve it. So you meet those requirements, but you have to have it in policy to state that you did. Make sure. And then we update it.
So they have to move forward with this probably regardless, even though we've already submitted a plan.
That is correct.
Money's been allocated and approved, this is just added.
Because you receive federal money, you have to have federal regulations in your policy. Disposition of real property. I don't know if you guys had closed any buildings, but you had. Oh, and then you reopened the one. That's right. Now I remember. So, in essence, if you're closing a school or you have a building that has less than 60% capacity, you have to provide that to a charter school to purchase that building as Wayne developed. Now, that charter school has to be within the boundaries of your school district. Do you even have one? You probably don't.
We don't have the building that would apply to that. And I don't think we have any charter schools within the boundaries at this point.
So, in order to be compliant with statute, you have to have the new change, which changed the biennial budget, I believe, that in one that is less than 60% of the building was used for drug construction.
What portion of the building qualifies as 60%? Are we talking classrooms or building square footage? I mean,
60% capacity, I believe. 60% capacity of the building is used for academic instruction. So let's say you have a building that you're using mainly for storage. If you've got a charter school within that community, or within your district boundary, you have to offer it to them.
I'm just saying, technically, if you have a very large gymnasium and a large cafeteria
But
that aren't used for academic instruction,
that's
would
right.
that?
You can't count that.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
wanted to
I
put
think
it-
the state or ODE sets that's capacity. So we're good with all that.
Well, if you've got 10 classrooms and you're only using 2 of them, that's under 60%.
Yeah,
capacity.
that's all I was saying.
That's what I think is the best way to look at it, but you guys are good. But that one's ready to go. That reflects statute. The next one, you can reject property inventory citations. Why change, why reject it? Because you have a $5,000 threshold. So since you established your $5,000 threshold for inventorying purposes and so on, your single item, you're compliant with federal IDEA, federal ESSER requirements, and you really don't need to change. So our recommendation was to let treasurers know that you have that $5,000 threshold. We really don't change the policy, make any recommendations. There are some places that still have a $300 and a $500 threshold for inventorying equipment, which would be crazy to do that anymore.
Is that $5,000 amount based off of purchase cost or?
The item, purchase
That's what
item.
I'm saying, what if it diminishes in value? I mean, is it appraised?
Well, that's part of your gap conversion, your gap accounting conversion, that they'll adjust that. So as time goes on, that's where they'll start and then capitalize that out. So when you have a new item that's purchased, it must be included in that inventory. And then you have to do that at least once every 2 years. Student records, this may affect you guys. The change is that public directory information for students, when the military has requested for student directory information, you have to include district assigned email addresses if you provide it. And I think you guys do provide one. So you just have to provide them to the military if they ask. Bless you. And that's with this new Sullivan Amendment that was approved this last year, state and federal.
And we went along with the so-called high school. Asked and talking to some good one, and they'll ask for the directory.
We have to give them their other info, so we might as well give them it.
Because sometimes
For the military,
From the military.
Just the military, but if-
that is because we have by law, we have to, doesn't happen very often.
We have a policy on other people who what we give.
correct, and it's included in there just above that one provision. So you're talking about directory information shall not be provided in organization for profit making. The GAP can't ask for all the kids' email addresses, and then this designates by statute what is actual directory information. But part of the interstate compact that we belong to, Indiana, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, we all agreed that when the military asked for it, we were providing the emails along with name, address, sports, things like that. So that one is ready to go. Item 8400, we've re-included this every time and for the last 2.5 years because we knew that ODE was going to require having threat assessment language in your school safety policy. You guys were proactive. You did include that. Let me see if I saw it up here. So 8400 for school safety. You did include your threat assessment language so you can reject this one. Okay, all it's doing is removing the option of having threat assessment language in your school's fund, in your school safety. So you have it, there's no need for any action, so you just reject that. Statute changed again on student abuse and neglect. We made some of the adjustments earlier in one of the other language on suicide and so on. You'll see that there's no options in this. It was changed by statute. So when you read through it, it talks about the prevention, instruction in the health classes and so on. And then providing awareness training for every one of your staff members. Law enforcement officer or children's service agency investigating child abuse and neglect may interview a student on school grounds only in accordance with policy 5540. So it's just a procedure and communications. But this also requires you to have some type of anonymous tip mechanism.
Yeah, we do. We're talking about that county in our county, yes, right now.
Oh, okay.
Because we all bought into that one, I don't know.
We do the Sandy Hook Promise.
Sandy Hook
See
Promise.
something, say something. So it's,
Yeah.
it's on our website. So when we go under mental health and awareness link, you
Good.
can go there where you can actually.
Does that agency provide you with a report, an annual report on the number of complaints? And all
I
that?
don't know if it
I believe they give it if we.
The bottom line is the law is very clear that it requires you to be able to provide a report of the anonymous tips and so on to ODE at the end of the school year.
The ESC, we actually just got an email last week that they're looking at this and revising this. So.
Okay, there is Ohio has contracted through Homeland Defense with this called Safer Ohio Tip. It's not an easy application. It's kind of clunky, but it's free. But it's terrible. So if you're using the Sandy Hook one or Safe Schools Hotline, those are the two best ones to use. So you'll be good.
We're good.
But you'll need to change your policy on there. So, but that's ready to go.
I know it's currently up and running, I just double checked
It
it.
is.
So,
Perfect. You have it on your website so people have access to.
correct.
Student transportation,
So we have to go back and change the St. Raphael tip line?
no, you do not.
Okay.
No, you do not. It's, since that's the generic one,
Okay.
you just have to have a safe tip line. If you're not using that one, you have to produce it. You have.
Okay. Thank you.
If you'd rather change it, I would, because I think what's going to happen, the next update, because nobody's using it, they're going to take it out of there and just say anonymous tip line.
Thank you.
So you could do that or just wait. Transportation. The biggest change is that there's a process now that's changed a little bit about how you do your payment with transportation. And once you identify them, you can address that. It doesn't, there's been a question in many districts, when you pay it, it's still, from what we can tell, a district decision. So a treasurer can pay them at the end of the year or pay them up front. What is it, $250 or $225? $250 is the amount. Do you even have many?
Yeah, that handful.
You do, because the students are busing over to St. Aquinas or what's the
Yeah.
St. Thomas.
St. Thomas.
Regina,
Biomed.
St. Joe's and a few others that we do.
So we have more than in years past then?
We have, that's interesting because somebody asked that. I'll look it up, but we had about the same, basically.
It generally runs about the same. I thought.
It should be about the
And
same,
it's
and
not
probably
that
by
many.
family or something, that they've always done with kids that. But just be aware that those rules have changed, and you don't have any
And
options.
just so you know, we had 17 this year, we had 15 last year. One point we had 12. It's hovered around, right around 15.
And that's because you got some of those kids are graduating, and some are
Yeah.
new entering those private schools. We added some additional language. I added some additional language that, like these 3 paragraphs, 4. What happened is that somewhere along in the update, these required passages were omitted somewhere in the past. I can't tell when. So this highlighted text I put back in there for you. If you don't want it, delete it or remove it. But I think what it does, it will safeguard you.
Yes.
But this is all part of for how I could have, because I mean,
It
my
is.
legal updates with the A team, I gave this to my transportation person at the beginning of the year, because we went back and looked, and was there anybody that questioned before April and things like that, so.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And again, it's that concept of putting it in your policy so the general public understands that. They don't have to become attorneys to figure out. So sometimes a little more is better in the policies.
Very good.
The old days, we always thought less was best, but litigious society, we're probably better off having more.
Very good.
Non-routine use, buses, you have this policy, but because of the changes, I'd recommend just doing the replacement policy. So as you're reviewing it, you have to figure out on your non-routine trips, do you have like a transportation supervisor, or what's the title of the transportation person?
Transportation supervisor.
I don't assume that.
The director.
There's some places a difference between director and
Right,
supervisor.
ours is supervisor.
Okay.
Did that come under the law of what remember they define as supervisor? We better check that, but I'm pretty sure. Sherry Allen Gross.
Transportation supervisor. So I added that for you.
Check to make sure that we
That one's good to go.
We do not.
You probably don't do any non-routine use.
We don't. But we do not have a written agreement with anybody, state, local government, for an emergency that I know of. You know what I mean? The board may enter the very last thing to you.
Yeah.
Do you know? I don't think we
No, we
have.
currently-
I'll ask
we
Sherry.
But you're allowed to, you don't have to.
We don't have to. If there would be an emergency though, like the National Guard is allowed to drive, I've always understood that.
They can take those commandeered, but
That's-
are you actually taking your buses, driving the kids over in the surrounding community to bring them back here, or use your buses and your drivers to help with, give you an example, up around the lake in Lake County, Geauga County, and Ashtabula County, because of the power plant up there, a lot of them have an agreement, but it's all understood that if there's a catastrophe at Perry Nuclear Plant, they're busing those kids out. But you would normally help out any way that
Right.
you could do anyhow. This was an option that was put in
Okay.
there, so it's up to you. If you don't want it, you can take it out. It doesn't hurt to have it. It just says the board may.
Leave it in there, I think, don't you, Ed? I mean.
I think it doesn't hurt you to have it in there.
Yeah.
If something happens with local, state, or federal, Fmla,
It would only make sense to me is if somebody would call up the school and let's say Alliance and says, hey, we're in an emergency situation, we need to use 3 or 4 of your buses. The board would have to say okay to that, which would make sense.
Well, we do that already, where the county has an agreement for that.
yeah, especially in the last year where bus drivers are hard to come by. You might contract with a neighboring district, but this year, is that kind of an emergency? Yeah, because if you can't bus your
Right.
kids, so the board, but you've been sending that information to the board. What you can't do is, because it's dealing with authorized entities, John Smith is having a party, the 50th anniversary party, and therefore we would like to be able to bus all their friends.
School bus smash up derby.
We don't do that, or we don't take kids to the law. You're not allowed to do that anymore. Like some of them.
And summer-wide, that is covered in your non-routine.
Yeah.
So you can do that if you need to. Bonding, this is the biggest change. We talked a little bit about this in the past. The bonding issues, boards generally bond their treasurers. Some treasurers have lost bonds and they don't want to be out of jobs, so therefore they lobbied strong, and OASBO and them had pushed passing the law that treasurers can either be bonded or covered by a blanket liability insurance policy plan. And so the law changed, so you can either be bonded or covered by an insurance policy issued, board approved and accredited insurance carrier. Or if you're in a self-insured pool, some communities have, and maybe through some, Stark County, we might have an insurance pool through the ESC.
So we want our treasurer to keep being bonded.
Yeah,
Because of
you
the
can
rules
do
of the
bonding or you can do insurance.
Now we'll keep the bonding.
Well, you can,
That's what
but the law allows you to do either one.
Oh, so you're
So-
saying we don't have to choose in this policy?
That's correct. You don't have to choose in the policy.
Yeah, okay.
The policy is changed to reflect statute,
You can.
whatever the
Yeah.
board wants to do.
Yeah.
They can do.
Okay.
And then that would be the last policy for you to be updated. That's ready to go. I went ahead and worked on your administrative guidelines too for you, but you can go through those if you want. I did merge them best I could. So go up here to the top
Oh,
where
you
you
have
see
to
change the book
To administrative,
to the administrative guideline manual, and those are in there.
okay.
I made the changes however you want to use that. In order, we mentioned before about the administrators, evaluation procedures is in your administrative guideline if you want to use that. Even though your policy is general about this here highlights how you have to do it. So if you want to look through there and make some adjustments to it, you can. For the treasurer's point of view, last year we should have changed our FMLA administrative guidelines. I believe you do have your administrative guidelines for FMLA, and we adjusted that in each one of the categories for administrators, professional staff, and classified staff. The biggest change is at the bottom. We have to determine these two options. Under some circumstances, the board may elect to maintain other benefits like life insurance, disability, by paying both the employers and the employees share of those premiums during unpaid leave of absence. You may do that, you may not, but just make sure it's consistent. Or, upon written request, an employee may continue non-group health plan benefits which the board elects not to maintain during the periods of unpaid leave. So if board's not paying them during that time, then the employee would be able to pay them if you check that box.
Okay.
And that would be COBRA or whatever. Or they know that they're coming back 5 weeks, you don't fully COBRA, but just charge them, but they'd have to reimburse you for the payment. So review that and decide what you want to do with that. If you want to include this last section, periodic status reports, you could pick that. It's not mandated by FMLA procedures, but it's probably a good practice, especially when you have people who are on FMLA. You got to tell us, are you coming back? Are you getting better? So it allows you to require the employees to at least respond to you about getting a status report. I'm not coming back, or things aren't going well. Then they're allowed to go on up to 2 years of unpaid medical by statute here in Ohio. But you don't have to pay them, you don't have to provide benefits, you don't have to do anything. Providing of benefits only relates to the time period that they may be unpaid during FMLA leave. So review that, that's in the guideline. Michael, I updated all of them. You can review for them. If you've got questions, give me a holler. I didn't add your blended learning one because you just simply, you're not using it. Did you approve the guideline when you did the glucose? Approve. You did reject this one.
That was rejected.
I thought we rejected it.
It was approved previously, so.
Right. But when you did in March, did you do the guideline then? You didn't take it at all? Okay.
You don't know.
Nasal or an injection?
EMS service is too long. That's pretty neat.
So that may be a procedure that you want to look at. When you're reviewing the 5722 policy on the student publications, you may want to consider reviewing your administrative guideline, because of the places that districts are getting dinged on violation of students' rights is that they can't document how they're restricting or reviewing student publication or students' work before it's released. Is it a big a deal? Not so much, but it's provided there if you need. And then the other ones we've already updated for you. So what you want to do is just take a look at all the others, student records and so on. Questions for me?
Nick, would you be able to bring up a policy or bylaw 0145? We had come across using this policy, filling the board vacancy, and it just had one clause in it that was not up to date.
Okay. Did you have it in the draft? No.
No, it would just be our actual
All right,
policy.
so tell me that number again.
145.
Filling a vacancy?
Right, and then down toward the bottom of it, where it says if we fail to fill the vacancy in 30 days, that the local Stark County, or the local EFC will act.
I put it in the draft, so this is it right here.
Put down,
Okay, filling the vacancy where?
going
Keep
down,
going down.
where it talks about if we fail to act. It's down farther than
At
that.
the bottom. and then above
Right
the
there. Okay, so where it says appointment to fill the vacancy right under.
if the board fails to appoint a.
Go up a little bit more right there, that paragraph.
Within 30 days, this is statute, after the vacancy occurs, the board of the Educational Service Center in which the district is located, upon being advised, failure.
And so we were told that it's the probate judge.
It is generally the probate judge.
Right. So is that something you can correct for us?
Let me pull out the actual template that we've used.
Okay.
And then we'll double check that. The only difference in the caveat here is that you're a local district, and locals fall under the responsibility of the ESCs.
But we were
That
told
might be the
Yeah,
con-
we were told we couldn't. We had to go to the probate judge.
I think in days past.
In days past, that's for
Now,
sure, but I don't
don't
know if
think
that's
you
that.
can now, according to, we asked a couple of attorneys.
We asked a couple of
And they're still telling you that it's probate.
It's gotta
That's
be.
what
the
we were
judge,
told.
yeah.
Well, and that's normal for cities for sure. But that was the only caveat.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind looking into that.
Let me do that for you real quick.
Also, one of the components of that on the petitions to file for office, there's an option to establish a committee that in some part of this process of a replacement, that committee has the power to choose the replacement on the actual candidate petition.
And you're saying that that's what the county was doing?
Yeah,
Or-
on the
No,
count.
Board of Elections.
No, yeah, the Board of Elections, on the petition to file to run for board member,
Right.
there's an option to establish, it's not the candidate committee, I gotta look up the petition, see how it's worded, but it's a certain committee
It's a committee.
that the candidate can put on there, a group of up to 5 people, that in certain circumstances of a vacancy, those people choose the replacement.
If that person gets elected but dies or something before they...
Yeah, and I'm not sure if
Is
that
that what
would
that
be in
is?
the
Apparently
policy.
anytime during their term, and it was explained by the Board of Elections that it goes first to the board. If they can't decide, then it goes to the committee, if you established one. And then third, it will go to probate court.
I never heard such a thing.
It's there.
It's on the petition.
But I don't think that's statute.
It's because I'm an appointed trustee, and they told me if the board can't decide, that guy had a committee we call a party of 5, and
Yeah.
you know.
But you don't have to have
Five,
5.
but he
It's up
didn't.
to 5.
Well, they called it, but he didn't have that, so the board agreed that it's there.
So if I'm leaving, I can choose my predecessor.
Well,
Or
the
your-
board,
Or my successor.
Your committee.
There's no way.
Your committee
The
can
board
choose, yeah.
gets the
It's
first
there.
option.
Yeah, if the board can't decide.
If the board can't agree.
That's got to be something unique to Summit County or Stark County.
No, I don't think so.
It's on the petitions for running for
Some
office.
Ohio-
Just because it's on that petition, I can't. I've never ever, and I've been in this 37 years. I've never ever dealt with that.
Most
And I
people
even
don't.
ran for political office myself. I've never ever seen that.
I don't know how new that is.
Most people
been on there
don't
for a
name
while.
one.
I don't know. But
So
I know
there's
it's-
it never gets used.
You
is
can
what
pick
it
up to 5 people who.
Get to pick who
You may
you
pick your
replace.
You
predecessor.
choose your
yeah.
replacement.
No matter when you leave office,
Yeah, but that's
Anytime during-
before your term's up.
yeah. If you leave, the board that you're serving with, the other members of the board get the first shot at replacing you. If it's a divided board, then it goes on to that committee. If that committee,
And
if that committee for whatever reason, if you chose a even number of people, if they were, couldn't decide, then it would go to the probate court.
I never ever heard that. And I've been on boards that were close to getting probate because they had like a day or 2 days to finally appoint somebody.
Well, no, it's pretty rare that people fill that out on their petitions.
And I've never seen that on a petition.
It's definitely there. Now, whether, I don't think it could just be a Stark County thing. How could Stark County just...
As long as it's the whole state.
I don't know. I've never seen it. Man, that blows my mind because that changes the dynamics
Yeah.
and it doesn't allow for truly democracy, I does.
Well,
you're
if
picking-
you think about it, it does, because if you go to a split board, the person that's leaving will have peers of theirs that will choose a replacement that more resembles their beliefs.
But they
That was the-
still only get to serve till either the next
Yeah, that is-
election. It's not
Yeah,
like they get to fulfill
just
your
in
term.
between.
It's
Yeah.
That blows my mind. And then I did see, driving through the community, you have two different slates.
We do.
I thought, oh, that's interesting. I've not
We
seen
got
that.
4 people running for the rest of the 2-year term of the board member that resigned.
Oh, you had a resignation?
Yeah,
Okay.
4 people running for that.
And so you have somebody that has filled that
Yes.
unexpired term.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
on there now.
We
Yeah,
appointed, the board
till-
appointed somebody to fulfill the rest of the first 2 years of that term. But now the remaining 2 years are back on the ballot.
Yeah, that would have to be.
There's 4 people vying for that one seat for 2 years term.
Wow. A lot of interest in the board, I guess, huh?
That's a statewide.
I don't know why so many people wanted to run for the 2-year term, you know. So you gotta run again in 2 years?
Yeah, they get on.
Well,
One of them will.
some people don't want more than a 2-year here on
That's
the
true.
ballot.
That's probably what it
I'm
is.
trying to-
Yeah.
All right, so,
And there was just a couple policies. I was wondering if you could put them somewhere that we could just read them. That the board wanted to just look at those with the choices that we had and compare it to the policy that we chose. If I gave you a couple numbers, is that something you could drop
oh,
somewhere?
absolutely. No, let me know.
Let me know when you're ready.
Give me the numbers.
2266,
Yep.
2240,
Okay.
2220,
2220.
and 1662.
1662.
Yes. And if we could we just want them like in the form, the original form before.
Yeah, the original template. You
Correct.
take a look at them.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can log in here
This was
still.
just
I can do that before I leave.
For your, those were the ones that you compared up. Policy, see if there's any conflict. So, did you get a printable petition?
Marlington Public.
Yeah, I'm just looking.
What's the one that connect? It connect.
Do you see those? All right, so 1662, I'm looking in the draft. Can't we see those already yet, or do you?
You can see what your policy is, but I think she's asking for the actual templates.
I think I'm in. Here's the. Well, maybe that's.
You can
not
bring
that
the
one.
templates
You
up.
can bring up. Here's. I'm in draft, and that's 1662. You mean taking it way back?
Yeah, the overall actual template that shows you all the options.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Who knows what it'd be for this meeting? We just want to go over those.
So, and just as an even more policy,
Mhm.
1662 active, as it, and I wrote some of this down. I don't want you to bring it up for, I have to step out. Compliance officers, we just need to change names.
Oh, we can do that easily enough.
Okay, so like I went through some, like, you know, like,
To
compliance
change
officer,
in
my
your name or
my
somebody
name's
else.
It still says Joe Knoll.
No, my name's still in there, but
Do we need
I'm
names,
still
or
with-
can we just put titles?
we gotta admit, for certain, like Title IX, for certain
You have to
compliance
have
officers.
specific
their
There
names
are certain ones you have to have names, but the
Okay.
other ones you can have titles.
So it was Carol and myself. My name doesn't need changed, but Carol needs removed. And I was advising it might be reviewed for Renee on there because you would have a male and a female
Yeah.
for any aspect of that. So I just,
We could, who knows, new Title IX stuff, there may not be a
that's
difference.
policy 1662, the anti-harassment policy.
Thank
If
you.
you scroll to the bottom of that, you'll see the anti-harassment compliance officers. It just says Carol's name and then mine's fine. But Carol's would be changed unless you want to change the address of where I'm located. And that'd be the same, that's all it's here.
Is that the, I don't know if that's the only place that names.
I don't
names
think
are
that's the only place where it does that. I don't know if you can do a mass, because it wouldn't say assistant superintendent, you just,
Just
like it
search.
says Renee Cayley, curriculum director.
Could you
Can-
search
if you-
all the policies for specific names, so you could?
Yeah, you can do a search that way. It'll bring up, and then, yeah, you probably had Carol in them, and it would.
Like home was, like our McKinley Vento Act, that's now me, that was Carol, so that would be switched from Carol to me.
So what we do is search for Carol in the active policies, and then it'll bring up that list, and then you right-click on that policy title in the left page, and I'll show you how we can do that. It'll then give you three options. And in the active, you can
Ones that
only
are required
do
to have
two
names
options,
and names,
either
and the ones that are just
duplicate it
positions.
or make it feature.
No?
Okay.
So you click duplicate, it'll make a copy in the draft.
Oh,
And
yeah.
in draft is where you're allowed to.
It's in the monthly update.
Yeah. So then you can correct all those.
It's in the newsletter.
Now, when those names change, those would have to be readopted by the board, is that correct?
In a technical sense, yes.
Okay.
Some don't.
That's what they're
But
board members here.
We recommend that boards should approve those. Even though it's a technical change, Michael and them would have the authority to make that technical change. So there's a couple ways that someplace to do it. Mike would make the changes and then provide the information to the board that we've updated these 15 policies. Or you could go and present them back to the board would then reapprove all those because of the name change.
I just knew that.
I moved those for you.
And they're in the draft or?
They're in draft, so if you refresh
Okay.
and you're on there right this minute, it'll bring it up. I have, again, it's 2220, adoption of course of study.
Yes.
2240, controversial issues. 2266, which is the non-discrimination Title IX policy. And then the administrative template. So it's in program templates or administrative templates, and that is anti-harassment. So you now have the template that we have updated all along, and all the notes and the options that you have.
Okay, thank you very much, I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Anything else, guys? We'll talk about probate. You wanted the template, bylaw 145. Forgot about doing that. Shit.
Yeah, I guess we've done a little bit.
Which one is that?
Filling board vacancy.
Oh, yeah, that's the point, yeah. We probably should, while we're doing
Yeah,
updates, we should update that.
Yeah.
It's very.
Well, yeah, that's what it should be.
It's just a few of them that have to have it specific.
Yeah, we just have to find out which one is.
I only bring it up because we have England mandated notices we have to keep updated on our website. We look through it, I might notice some of them are just.
Yeah. And then we provide you with that list of the things that have to be updated every year in the spring. So
Which
it's in the handbook.
category are those under? Are they under requested for review or under?
No, in the draft, you'll see at the top there, it's the 1,000 administration template. You find it there for 1660?
Under 1,000?
Are you in the draft section?
Yes,
And so you'll see
Okay,
the
yeah.
word template,
yes.
administration template, and then you have 2,000 program templates.
All right, thank you.
Those are in there for you. And then I've just added the bylaw template, which is the 145,
So those are the ones.
filling the board
Here.
vacancy.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
They're able to run a report home and be able to switch your name.
Yeah, that's,
Show
you
you
should.
vice versa.
We have to look at, yeah.
So as you can, Carolyn, if I can read that, on the board filling of the vacancy, the template actually reads, if the board fails to appoint a member to its board within 30 days after the vacancy occurs, the probate court of the county, upon being advised of the failure to fill the vacancy, shall act as the board and perform the duties imposed upon the board. So they will.
So that would be current.
So, to be honest with you, the way your policy reads is probably a Larry Morgan issue, and that's probably where that came from.
Okay. Well, we were told we couldn't follow our policy, is what we were told.
Well, you can, yeah, but that's, you could, I guess, but what's the new superintendent, Chris or Joe?
What's interesting, because I asked an attorney who years ago was a school attorney, and he told me that ESC gets to appoint that person.
And that might have been because of the.
So years ago, that's
Yeah,
the way.
and that's been the
but
same
he was a
since-
Stark County. It might have been a Larry Morgan thing.
Who knows?
Who knows? But it's not, sure not the way you're written here now.
Thank you.
All right. So what's our plan here moving forward? Because our board meeting is
Next.
a week from today. None of these are really strictly time bound, are they?
No.
So we could do November 7th.
You could if you want.
Instead of-
I wouldn't. If
You
you're.
probably want some of them, like the ESSER one, sooner than later, just to be, right? Some formal.
I would think just in case.
They're gonna take
When's your
2
audit?
weeks. We could get started.
When did your audit already start?
Yeah, that one's probably one
So
that
you
we want to have.
probably should.
But we're doing it. And it's, we can,
And you can demonstrate that you guys already have it and you're doing it. So it's not something that you're stated out and cause you a citation.
The only one that's not finished is this 5722.
Right.
Yeah, it's a long one, it's complicated, but once you walk through it, you'll see that it makes sense.
This is the committee I was telling you about
On the petition.
on the petition form. I hereby designate the person's name below as the committee to represent me. The state doesn't have an instruction form for the form number 2. So it doesn't really, it doesn't state what it's for on this form. But you can put a name, residence of up to 5 people.
Well, at one point, declaring the candidacy, but it's this, the only thing that I can think of, that list could be the list that's only the list of those individuals who are allowed to circulate petitions for
No,
your.
that's down,
So
at
that's
the
still
bottom,
those
there's
individuals right
your
here.
signature circulator,
Circulator.
that's down for that.
Never seen that.
I don't know that that needs to
Nobody
be.
uses it, it's like one of those little things, and it could prevent all kinds of issues when you have split boards and stuff like that.
And it's only on the Board of Education.
Oh,
petition.
yeah.
It's on other petitions too, like Mike said, Mike, that was on your petition as
Oh,
well, right?
yeah, yeah.
For
But it's-
trustee.
Yeah, but it's
Trustee.
funny, the Board of Elections said, well, I wouldn't do that. And they're not even supposed to advise you.
Yeah, they
Nobody
shouldn't
does
say
that.
Well, they
Yeah,
just
nobody does
explain
do
it.
that.
Well, why would somebody
Yeah.
do that? Well, but
let's
there
say-
could be
let's
some
say it's a
strategies to
contentious
do
board,
that.
Yeah.
and then you
Yeah.
put that there. And let's say you're not sure, you're having health conditions, or you might pass away, but you want to have control over who gets in there. That's for those
That
reasons.
could be the issue.
I don't know if it needs to be.
Or
in the
you're
policy,
running
though.
and you can get reelected. However, I know I'm not staying for 6 months, and therefore I want John Smith to
That
be
that
my
would
president.
probably not be a ethical thing to do doing that.
I
I'm
wouldn't
sure
think
people
so.
would do it.
But it is, that's the only loophole I can think of why you would do something.
Well, the Board of Elections said the procedure is that, we have to notify them that we have a vacancy, and at that point,
Right.
they pull the petition and look and see if there's a committee. If there's a committee, then they notify, if the board can't agree, they notify the board that there's this
I've
committee.
never ever heard that.
Even
That's
for
interesting.
example, with our school board, it almost got to the point of going to probate court. So had the person that vacated the office had that, those people could have, when the board was
Jumped in
divided,
there
they
to
could have
make
jumped in and determined it before it got sent to probate court.
And I had a mayor one time that wanted all the board members to resign, and then he kept telling everybody
Wanted
to
to appoint
pick
them
that. So no, you can't do that. He said, well, he said his rationale. He says, I'm a Republican, a leader in the county, and the probate judge is a Republican. What makes you think he won't follow my recommendation for those 5 new board members? Go at it, go for it, I guess, if that's what you want to do. But they didn't. I convinced my board members not to resign and go through the election. They made a public statement they weren't going to run again, 4 of them out of 5. They made the statement of not running, and then we got through the year, passed new levies and all that
There was
stuff.
that
I had 4 new board members, and then that following year I had
There's
one.
a school board in California during COVID that got caught on the hot mic talking
Yes,
about
I
parents,
saw that.
and they all resigned.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's not-
that's not.
But this is a different wrinkle. I just don't know if I would ever have come across that. But
It's been on there for a long time. I know that. It's just nobody utilizes it.
I hope nobody does. Well, guys, good luck. I hope I helped. Hope it didn't confuse you more, and
Thank you.
let me know if I can help out if you guys got questions.
You sure?
And we can either link up through a video, and I can run you through some tips. I can come back over and help you
Okay.
in the next couple of weeks if you want.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Good luck, buddy.
Thanks, Ed.
And you can-
Good to see you. Want to take a bagel?
No, no,
All
it's
okay.
right.
All right, thanks.
Have a good
Take
one.
care, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Our plan of action is
We're still on Ben waiting
So
for
do we
the
have,
camera.
do we have anything else for this meeting, Dr. Mike?
Oh, no, we can close.
Okay, the committee meeting is adjourned.
Or the